The Detroit Pistons had a wildly impressive Western road trip, finished the month of December 5-5. However, should you believe in what the Pistons were able to do in December, or was it a bit of fool's gold? We'll talk about what that means and whether you should believe in it or not in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers. That's our goal by the end of this season. We're about 800 subscribers away, so if you haven't already, please head over there and hit that subscribe button. I really would appreciate it. Or you can leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Also, make sure you guys are heading over to LockedOnDaily.com, typing in your email, and you'll get a Locked On Pistons daily newsletter along with your Locked On Pistons daily podcast. Also, make sure you guys text the number at the bottom of the screen if you are interested in being a part of the Locked On Pistons Insiders program. You can text with me one-on-one, get updates sent directly to your phone, rumors, insider information, trivia, all kinds of stuff get directly to your phone. I'll basically be your guys' own Adrian Wojnarowski for you guys, so you guys don't have to be on social media or whatever, for those of you guys who aren't on social media. So check out all that stuff. Also, later on in the podcast, should the Pistons be interested in going after Cam Johnson? We'll talk about that. And then also, Malik Beasley has been fantastic. I want to break down how good he actually has been for the Detroit later on in the podcast as well. But this topic was actually brought to my attention and something I want to talk about after seeing friend of the podcast, Keith Black Trudeau, who we've called on the podcast the historian of history itself. You guys probably follow him on Twitter. He's also on, what's the new social media that people are, Blue Sky. You probably know him as the guy who knows everything about Pistons history, everything about the NBA's history. He tweets out constant NBA throwbacks of the Pistons. Him and Isaiah Thomas have talked a lot. He has his own podcast, which he had Grant Hill on, Bad Boys and Beyond. So he tweeted this out a few days ago, and it actually got me thinking. So I want to talk about on the podcast. But he tweeted out saying that he thought that the Pistons, or how they played during the month of December, was fool's gold. And at first, I thought to myself, like, how could that be the case? The Pistons just went 3-1 on their road trip. They had some of their most impressive wins of the season in the month of December. How could it possibly be fool's gold? How could you possibly say this wasn't a great month? But then you look into the numbers, and I can see where the argument is. So now I want to present this to you guys. I'm going to give my opinion, and I want to hear from you guys. The Pistons went 5-5 during the month of December. That's straight. That's all right. It's nothing crazy. But they played like a 500 basketball team, and I think that's where everyone would like them to be at. And in the month of December, like I just mentioned, they went 3-1 on this gauntlet of a road trip against Los Angeles Lakers, against the Phoenix Suns, against the Denver Nuggets, against the Sacramento Kings. And they won 3 of those games. The goal I set for them before the road trip, I said they needed to go 3-1 to feel good about themselves. And they were 3-0, had a chance to go 4-0 against Denver, lost, but still 3-1 was tremendous. And they finished out the month 5-5. They are now 14-18. And like we mentioned on the last podcast, they're around a game and a half out of the 7th seed. You've also seen Cade Cunningham in the month of December win Player of the Week. We were just talking about him last week as potentially maybe Player of the Month for the Eastern Conference of December. You've seen Jaden Ivey come back over the last 4 or 5 games since sitting out a few games due to that injury, and he looks really good offensively since returning. Looks much more like the guy we saw at the beginning of this season. You've seen Ron Holland play a little better. You've seen Asar Thompson's minutes continue to go up. We're going to talk about Malik Beasley later. Malik Beasley has continued to be fantastic. So how could you possibly not feel great about how they played in December? Well, if you look at the numbers, the Pistons, I think a lot of what we talked about on the podcast at the beginning of the year, a lot of the things we discussed with each other are things that we're starting to see come to fruition with the Detroit Pistons. We expected all offseason, we talked about it, that they would be an offensive-heavy team, that this was an offensive-heavy roster. They spent a lot of resources into their spacing, into their shooting. They didn't really address their defense too much. They didn't put a lot of resources into that outside of drafting drafting Ron Holland. So So you expected this team to buy in, or at least I did. I expected them to buy into being that offensive team. I thought that would be their best chance at winning games because they just simply didn't have the defensive personnel. However, earlier in the season, as we've talked about a lot, they did lean into that defense, and somehow, some way, J.B. Bickerstaff was getting for the first 10 to 15-ish games, they were a top 10 defensive team in the NBA. Don't know how he was doing it. Don't know how they pulled it off, but they were leaning into their defense, and their offense was really struggling. If you look at the month of November, the Pistons had a defensive rating of 111.7. That would be 12th in the entire NBA. That's punching way above their weight. That was fantastic. Don't know how JB got that out of them, but they had a defensive rating of 111.7. Again, 12th in the NBA. Their offensive rating, however, was towards the bottom of the NBA. They had a 110.8 offensive rating, which is 23rd in the NBA during the month of November. So they were a bottom 7 offense, but a top 12 defense. This had them, in the month of November, they had a net rating of minus 1.0. That's 17th in the NBA. So basically, according to their net rating, they played like a middle-of-the-pack team. They played like an average basketball team in the month of November. They went 8-9 in the month of November, which, again, around a 500 basketball team. And again, the net rating was only minus 1.0. They weren't getting blown out. They were in every single game and had chances to win at the end of the games. They just weren't able to. So that's what they did in the month of November. In the month of December, which is the month we're discussing here, is it fool's gold? It completely flip-flopped. You started to see the offense pick it up. You started to see the offense showcase where you really expected them to be based off the acquisitions they made in the offseason. Getting Tobias, getting Malik Beasley, getting THJ, re-signing Simone Fontecchio. You know, the starting lineup that they've decided to go ahead and start with, which is the Cade, Ivey, THJ, Tobias, and Duran lineup that has all offensive players, not many defenders. You start to see the team match that offensive personnel with their actual performance. In the month of December, in the 10 games that they played, they had a 113.7 offensive rating. That would have them 12th in the NBA. Now, remember, in the offseason, we discussed a lot that I thought that if they leaned into their offense, if they leaned into the strength of this roster, which I think is their offense, they could have a top 10 to 15 offense. I believe that's something we talked about a lot during the offseason. So during the month of December, their offense did do that. And that was a lot of the talk in November was the offense has to catch up. The offense has to catch up. The defense, I said on the podcast, it was like maybe 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we spent a whole podcast talking about how the defense, you're starting to see it crack. As the defense falls, the offense needs to raise to make up for it. And the offense has risen. They're 12th in the NBA over the month of December. Cade played fantastic. We're going to talk about Malik Beasley later. Malik's been great. Jaden Ivey over the last 5 games really started to pick it back up. He looks really really good. Even THJ is hitting more of his shots from beyond the arc as well. You're starting to see Simone wake up a little bit. So you're getting all, it really, it coordinates. I think it has the most to do with that Cade played so great in the month of December as a playmaker, and his teammates, Jaden Ivey, Malik Beasley, THJ, were doing such a great job of scoring off of his gravity that, you know, when your best player plays at the level Cade played at, with the type of play style he is, that heliocentric, I'm going to score, I'm going to create all the advantages for everybody. If you can cash in those opportunities, your offense will be pretty damn good. And that's what it was in December. However, their defensive rating completely plummeted. They went all the way down to the 28th ranked defense in the league in the month of December. They had a 119.3 defensive rating. So their offense went from 23rd to 12th in the month of December, from November to December. And then their defense from November to December went from 12th all the way down to 28th in the NBA. That's a drastic fall off. And I think that's mostly, if you want me to be honest, which what I've been consistent about this. I've never thought this team had great defensive personnel. I thought this would be a pretty bad defensive team. However, the reason why there is an argument, or at least something to pay attention to when you talk about is this fool's gold, is that in the month of November, the Pistons were in every single game. They finished the month 8-9, and they had a net rating of just minus 1.0. That seemed, that just on the surface level, that seems more sustainable, right? If you look at the net rating in December, the Pistons, yes, they were 5-5, but they had a net rating of minus 5.6. That would have them in the bottom 8 of the NBA. So they won a few high-scoring games, but the games they didn't win, they were getting blitzed. It wasn't close games. And their defense fell off the face of the earth. So the question is what the Pistons did in December sustainable? Is that something that they could be able to build on and continue to do? Or, like our friend of the podcast, Keith Black-Trudeau, points out, is it fool's gold and it's not something they can continue to do and they just get, I guess, lucky in some of these games? I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. I don't think the Pistons just got flat out lucky. They played really well offensively, and you can win games as an offensive team. However, as we've talked about on the podcast, when it comes to the starting lineup, I guess it's just a matter of, do you believe that the Pistons, with this roster personnel, is it possible to find a balance of the two? I think that's the real struggle here. Can you find a balance where you are getting league average to maybe above league average offense and get maybe just slightly below defensive impact to where you can have a more sustainable team? Because that is true. The Pistons being a top 12 offense and then a bottom 3 defense is not going to be sustainable. Just like I believed in the month of November that being a bottom 7 offense and a top 12 defense wasn't sustainable for the Pistons. They have to find a way, and maybe it's not possible with this personnel. Maybe they're going to have to lead completely into their offense to carry throughout the season to remain as a 500 type basketball team. Maybe that is the answer. But it's going to be a lot harder to do that with your defense being bottom 3 in the league. So can they do something to where they can get their defense to catch up a little bit without sacrificing their offense? Will starting Asar Thompson in place of THA, can you keep your offense impacting at a high level and also try to raise your defense? That's something I'd like to see. Could it be Ron Holland? I'd like to see that. Could just starting Isaiah Stewart instead of Jalen Duren, could that be a fair swap? Like that, those are things I'd like to see happen and see if that actually, how that impacts the team. Because I do agree, you are not going to be able to sustain being a 500 basketball team with a bottom 3 defense. You're just not going to be able to do it. So I think the Pistons month wasn't fool's gold. I think they should be incredibly happy and proud of how they played, especially on that road trip. They should be extremely happy with how they played. They should be extremely happy with how they were able to close some of those games. Extremely happy about it. However, there's a quote out there from, I forget which coach it was, but a legendary coach said, it's a famous quote, never accept things in wins that you wouldn't accept in a loss. So you can believe two things at once. They're not mutually exclusive. Should the Pistons be excited and proud of themselves for how they played in December? 100%. Should they also be looking at, okay, we played well, we should be happy about it, but our defense is bottom 3. We're not going to be able to sustain that way. We have to do something to change this up, to level this out. Yes, as well. So I'm interested to see how JB goes about doing that. Because there is a part of me that just thinks there isn't really an answer to that on this roster, and you may just have to lean completely offensive for this season. So let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka What's your solution to this? Do you think it's a big deal? How do they try to find the level playing field of kind of meeting themselves in the middle on both ends of the floor? Or do you believe that they're just going to have to go full offense and just they don't have the personnel to make it happen on defense this year? Let me know what you guys think. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka When we come back, should the Detroit Pistons be interested in trading for Cam Johnson? We'll talk about that coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket RX. If you're ready to boost your confidence and take control in the bedroom, Rocket RX has that solution. Imagine feeling more prepared and performing at your very best. Rocket RX makes it simple and stress-free. Rocket RX offers FDA-approved treatments for erectile dysfunction at a lower cost than branded alternatives. No more uncomfortable doctor visits or pharmacy trips. You get all of that just with your Locked On Pistons host. Everything is delivered straight to your door in discreet, plain packaging. With Rocket RX, you'll get trusted care from a real U.S. clinical team, complete a quick 100% online consultation, and you can get your free prescription today. Visit RocketRx.com to get started now, and it only takes 2 minutes. Right now, our listeners can get 40% off your first order when you use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's RocketRx.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for 40% off your first order. Terms and conditions apply. Rocket RX. Better sex, made simple. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, so as I've told you guys many times over the last few weeks, once December 15th passed and more than 90% of the NBA could be traded, you were going to start seeing NBA trade rumors start to heat up. You were going to start hearing a lot more names in trade discussions. You were going to start seeing more teams shopping players, trying to trade for players, which teams are selling, which teams are buying. You're going to start seeing all that stuff pick up because of the December 15th deadline, where free agents who signed in the previous offseason can now be traded. And one of the guys who has been a hot name in the trade rumors, or in the trade market, I guess, is Cam Johnson. And that makes sense because the Brooklyn Nets are trying to blow things up. They were not trying to be a decent team this year. That was happening on accident. And they weren't some great team, but they weren't horrible. And that's what they want to be. This is a very good draft class. They are a rebuilding team. Right now they're 12-20, which is 12th in the East. But for a team like the Nets, really you're not looking at it like that. You're looking at it as Washington has a 7-game lead on us. Toronto has a 5-game lead on us. The Hornets have a 5-game lead on us. That's how they're looking at it. The Pelicans have a 7-game lead on us. That's how they're looking at it. That they're too far away from the top pick odds for them to continue winning like this at this level. They just won't get the pick that they want in a stacked draft at the top. So they're going to be selling off people. They've already traded DFS, Dorian Finney-Smith. They've already traded Dennis Schroeder. They're going to be trading Cam Johnson. I think they're probably going to also end up trading Cam Thomas. Remember, we talked about this on the podcast the other day, that a lot of the teams in the East are going to end up blowing things up and kind of force the Pistons, it seems like maybe, into being that 10th seed. Even if they don't want to be, they might just get forced into being that 10th seed. But anyways, the point of this is Cam Johnson is a name that has been all over the market. And according to recent rumors, or recent reports, the Nets are seeking multiple first-round picks for Cam Johnson. Is that something that the Pistons should be interested in doing? The clear answer here, and this is reported by Mark Stein, no, the Pistons should not be trying to give multiple first-round picks for Cam Johnson. I also just don't think the Nets will be getting multiple first-round picks for Cam Johnson. I don't think that he's worth that much. I don't think there's any NBA team out there that's going to give up multiple first-round picks for Cam Johnson. Don't think he's that good. He's a really good player on a fine contract, but he's not, he's not multiple first-round picks good unless you're a contender and you're giving up maybe picks you expect to be in the 29, 28, 29, 30 range. And even then, I don't think contenders would give up multiple first-round picks for Cam Johnson. I could see the Nets getting a first-round pick and maybe something else with them, a first-round pick and maybe a young prospect. I could see that being the case, but multiple first, don't see that. With that being the case, Cam Johnson, the player, should the Pistons be interested in? Yeah, Cam Johnson would be great for the Pistons. Cam Johnson is the type of player that the Pistons are still continuing, it seems, to try to find for this team. And this is the glaring hole that the Pistons have had, I feel like, on this team for 5 years now. And that is a highly productive, modern NBA four-man. A guy who can play the four and do the things you need out of a four-man. Now, they signed Tobias to be that. But Tobias has really struggled this year. He's not playing his best basketball. We've talked about in the last podcast. He's playing some of his worst basketball of his career. Probably the worst since his second season in the NBA. Maybe even his rookie season in the NBA. So you paid him that money, but he's not really getting the job done at the four position right now. And I feel like there has to be a level of concern that at 32 years old, is he coming back, or is this signs of I don't want to say the W word, but is he just declining? Is he just, is he past his prime, and is he just going to get worse as this year goes on and next year comes around? So I don't think Tobias is your guaranteed short-term answer, even just next year with this, with the way he's playing. And again, when the Pistons signed him, I don't think Tobias was seen to be guaranteed that option anyways. They signed him to a short-term contract, 2-year deal, and I think they want to use him maybe even next year as a salary filler in a trade. You need large contracts to match in trades, and Tobias can be that. So don't want to make this a Tobias tangent, but the point is that they went out and got Tobias to be that. That's how much they've needed this on the roster. They need modern NBA foremen on their team, and outside Tobias, they don't have anyone else on the roster that can do it, and Tobias himself isn't really doing it for him this year either. And Cam Johnson is someone who absolutely does that. He's averaging 19 points a game for the Brooklyn Nets this year. He's shooting 49% from the field, 43% from deep on 7.5 attempts a game. And his contract is a fine contract that I think everyone would be fine paying. He's only making $22.5 million this year, $20 million next year, and $22.5 million the year after that. So it's 2 more years after this on a really good deal, cheap, I would say borderline cheap deal, and takes him into his year 30 NBA season. So it's not like he's an old player to where he's going to be past his prime if you trade for him or anything. So contract-wise, it's a really good contract. He's a really good player. He serves exactly the position that you desperately need on this Pistons team. The Pistons, there's a lot of discussion about what do the Pistons need next. And you can certainly have your own opinions. I think there's 3 things that I think universally people agree on. It's just a matter of the order of the things you think, of the order of those 3 things. It's a starting level center that can play NBA level defense. It's a high level 4-man. And it's a secondary scorer, a legit sidekick next to Cade that can score, whether that's as a wing or as a 2-man. I think those are the 3 things I think universally are agreed upon that the Pistons need. Now, where you have those ranked is your own opinion. But Cam Johnson would 100% fill the need of a modern NBA 4. So I think he absolutely would fit. This is a guy who can give more effort defensively, is a better defender than Tobias Harris. It's not like he's an all-world defender, but he gives more. I think he has more to his toolkit. He has more impact on the defensive end than maybe Tobias has right now at this stage of his career. He's a much, much better scorer and shooter than Tobias Harris is as of right now in his career. And again, this isn't me trying to trash on Tobias. It's just the fact that the Pistons could still, and probably I think a lot of fans would rather upgrade at that position. Tobias could still be on the team as a backup 4. Like, he could still be that. But as a starting 4, I think a lot of people feel like the Pistons still need to upgrade at that position. And Cam Johnson is someone who can play at that position. He shoots the ball extremely well. He shoots on high volume. He's a young enough player to play and kind of, not grow, but kind of be a part of the core for the next few years. And he's on a cheap contract. So it just comes down to now, would the Pistons pay the premium to get him? And I got to be honest, I would feel a type of way. I would feel a type of way that the Pistons had a chance to just sign him outright, like 2 years ago, was it? 2 years ago in the free agency, and they just chose not to do that. And now 2 years later, not only do they have to pay his contract, but then you're asking them to give up assets to get him when you could have just signed him outright 2 years ago and you chose not to. That would probably leave a bad taste in my mouth. I'm not going to lie. But sometimes those are the things that happen. You can't really help that sometimes. So depending on the price, should the Pistons be interested in Cam Johnson? 100%. 2 first-round picks? No, that's too much. Would I give up an expiring contract and a protected pick for him? A few seconds? Stuff like that. Give them salary cap relief. Allow them to continue to tank and give them some assets with that as far as like second-round pick draft capital. Yeah. Would I give up maybe a protected first for him as well with that salary cap relief? Probably. Something like a THJ and some seconds, or THJ and protected first. Something like that. Yeah, I would do that. But multiple first-round picks, absolutely not. But I do think that Cam Johnson is a good enough player at the right position. And he fits the role that I think a lot of Pistons fans want as well. It seems like a lot of Pistons fans don't really want someone to come in that's going to take, usage from Jaden Ivey. They don't really want people who's going to come in and take usage from like Ron Holland and Asar. They kind of just want players that are just going to come in and play around them and just, fill minor roles, which I somewhat disagree with, but I feel like most Pistons fans feel that way. Cam Johnson does that. You don't have to worry about Cam Johnson coming in and trying to take all this usage away from Jay and Ivey. He just makes them both better. He fits on the court with both of them. He's not going to take all the minutes away from a Ron Holland or a Asar Thompson. He plays that position that doesn't force them to be 4 men. So he kind of fits perfectly, I feel like. It's just a matter of what the price is, and we'll see what happens with him. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think the Pistons should be interested in a Cam Johnson? And what would you be willing to give up for Cam Johnson? Let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at KukaHill. When we come back, I want to discuss just how good Malik Beasley has been for the Detroit Pistons this year. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? It definitely happened for me, especially with gym memberships that I had at multiple different gyms. Tried out, didn't go back, and just forgot I had them. They helped me cancel those subscriptions and find out just how much money I've been spending towards those type of subscriptions I just had no idea about. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together all in one place. Whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year, Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features, I feel like, again, like I just said, is the subscription tracker. Again, I found a bunch of subscriptions, not just to like other gyms, but Netflix, Hulu, stuff like that maybe I don't use as much. Lets me know how much I've been putting towards it. And if I'm not using it a lot, I could just cancel it like that within the app on Rocket Money. So again, cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon to reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Malik Beasley, I believe, has been the Pistons' best offseason acquisition in 5+ years. I think he's been, I honestly think for the bargain that you got him, for the role he's supposed to be in, for what he's supposed to help the young guys with, I think he was a better signing than Jeremy Grant. I think he's been absolutely, unquestionably fantastic for the Detroit Pistons. This year he's averaging 16 points a game. He's shooting 42% from deep on 9.3 attempts. Some of the highest volume in the entire NBA, and he's shooting it on some of the highest, at the highest clip in the entire NBA. He's obviously shooting 43% from the field, but more than like 80%, 70% of his shots are just straight up three-point attempts. Whether it's off movement threes, whether it's pull-up threes, whether it's self-created threes, whether it's catch and shoot threes. He's draining them all at an insane, absolutely insane volume and clip. This is a guy who's coming off the bench. He's not playing 30 minutes a game. He's only averaging 28 minutes a game. He's coming off the bench. He's not starting off the game in rhythm. He's having to come off the bench, get himself into rhythm, and he's playing like one of the very best six men in the entire NBA. When you look at the league leaders in three-pointers made, he is tied with Anthony Edwards with 125 threes made at the top of the NBA, for first in the whole NBA. And again, this is a guy who's only played 901 minutes for the Pistons. You want to talk about some of the other guys in the top 7? You're talking about Anthony Edwards with over 200 minutes more than him. Tyler Hero, who has over 140 more minutes than him. Jason Tatum, 150 more minutes than him. Derek White, 150 more minutes than him. And he's ahead of all these guys in less time on the court. He's getting a lot of threes up, which has been really helpful for the Detroit Pistons. They've needed for a long time, they've desperately needed somebody who is a high-volume three-point shooter that requires that type of gravity and it requires that type of respect by the defense off ball. They've had fine shooters in the past. They've had good shooters in the past before that shoot around 37, 38% from the field, but they don't require the same type of respect that Malik Beasley is getting from teams this year. Teams are terrified to leave him wide open. Teams, when he comes off of his off-ball screen, it's not to the level of Steph Curry. I'm not nowhere near trying to say that. But the example I'm going to use is Steph Curry. He's the most popular example. You guys know how Steph comes off the off-ball screens, and then the off-ball defender gets so scared of him getting open three, they go out, and now you got a free roamer behind slipping the screen. I mean, that happens with Malik Beasley at times because of how much fear he's putting into teams off-ball. There's been times. You go back to the game against the Sacramento Kings. You go to the game against the Miami Heat. You go to multiple games this year where it looked like the Pistons maybe were out of it, and then Malik Beasley just hits 4 straight threes in like a 2.5 minute span, and all of a sudden the Pistons are down by 1 or up by 3. Like, that's happened at least 5+ times this year because of how great he is shooting the basketball. And the numbers bear out that the Pistons are just straight up better when Malik Beasley is on the floor. Before we get to that, I do want to just point out some numbers to back up how great of a shooter he's been this year. On spot-up threes, he's in the 92nd percentile. Transition, 76th percentile. Coming off screens, he's in the 80th percentile. He's at the top percentile in every shooting category. On all jump shots, he's in the 87th percentile. On catch and shoot threes, 92nd percentile. Guarded catch and shoot threes, he's in the 94th percentile. Even when you get a hand up, even when he's contested, he's hitting threes at an insane clip. And that's 112 shots he's taken when contested. 112. And he's shooting 45% on contested threes. Not open threes, contested threes. He's shooting the exact same percentage, actually. The exact same percentage. 45.5% from 3 on guarded threes and open threes. The exact same percent. When you have a guy who is just as lethal guarded as he is open, the type of gravity that he demands as an off-ball presence just opens up the floor for Cade. Opens up the floor for Cade. Opens up the floor for Cade or for Jaden Ivey. His off-ball gravity, I don't think the Pistons have had anyone else with that type of gravity in 5+ years. I can't think of the last person that had that type of gravity. Maybe not to this extent, but the last guy that jumps to my mind is Luke Kennard. But Luke didn't get the type of volume up that you wanted him to. If Luke got this type of volume up, he would have. But one of the main critiques of Luke was that he was scared to shoot. He didn't shoot enough like you'd like him to shoot, at least with his time with the Pistons. So Malik Beasley has been absolutely fantastic. Then you look at how they play when he's on the court versus when he's off. It's staggering. It's absolutely staggering how much of a difference he is when he's on the floor versus when he's off. In 901 minutes, when Malik Beasley's on the floor, the Detroit Pistons have a plus 1.29 net rating. Let me pull this up, actually. I want to get this. Their offensive rating is 113.06. That would rank 9th in the NBA this year. That would rank. So the Pistons, when he's on the floor, they have the 9th ranked offense. When he's on the floor, they also have a 111.7 defensive rating. That would have you ranked 13th in the NBA. So the Pistons, when Malik Beasley is on the basketball floor, they have a top 12 offense and a top 12 defense. Top 13 defense, top 12 offense. When he's on the floor. When he goes off the floor, their offense remains somewhat the same. They're at 112.3. That would still be a top 15-ish offense. But their defense then drops off to a 121.3 defensive rating, which would be the worst in the entire NBA. So the Pistons are just a much better team when Malik Beasley's on the court. He's been, I think he absolutely has to be in the 6th Man of the Year conversation. He's been absolutely fantastic. And by the way, he's doing all this on one of the best bargain contracts, I think, in the NBA this year. But one of the best contracts in the NBA this year. He's on a 1-year, $6 million. The Pistons are getting this type of production from someone on a $6 million contract. When's the last time you've seen the Pistons front office get a deal like that? Who was the last one that provided that type of value on that low of a contract? Like they tried to do it multiple times years ago with Josh Jackson, with Mason Plumlee, with Jahlil Okafor, like stuff like that. I can't remember the last guy the Pistons got for this cheap that has impacted the team at this type of level. Malik Beasley's been, and that's not even talking about the stuff he's been, how good he's been in the locker room, how much of a presence he's been in the locker room, off the court, as a leader, as a veteran. He's been an A+++ signing for the Detroit Pistons. Absolutely fantastic. I think you absolutely have to bring him back. You have to do everything you can to bring him back. Now, again, if at the deadline you have talks with them and it seems like you aren't going to be able to bring him back, then I think you have to trade him at the deadline and get assets for him. But the priority number one should be talk with them, see if you believe that you guys will come to an agreement in the offseason. You will be able to pay him. If that's the case, that's priority one. If that's not the case, then okay, you probably will have to trade him at the deadline. But I think everyone would rather obviously have him back on a long-term deal because he's been great for the Detroit Pistons. So let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kukiel. How great do you guys think Malik Beasley has been? And do you guys want to bring him back? Or do you think the Pistons should shop him at the trade deadline, try to get some assets? And what kind of contract would you be willing to give him this upcoming offseason? Again, comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kukiel. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button at the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace out.